Okay, I'm trying this again. I talked for 11 minutes and my phone just cut off, and apparently I was not recording, though I swear I was recording. My phone has never done that before. That's so weird. Anyway, this is Faith at Faith and Books, and I'm gonna really shorten things. I was going on and on about James Monroe. I'm gonna do a review of this book, The Last Founding Father, James Monroe and a Nation's Call to Greatness by Harlow Giles Unger. And then I'll give a quick update of where I am reading-wise. I had a slumpy week, and this is the only book I finished. But this was a really interesting book. This is an interesting time period to me. I love the turn of the 17th, 18th century, that time period. Monroe was born in Virginia in 1758, and he was not rich. His father was a carpenter, but he had a rich uncle who was a judge, and his parents died when he was in his early teens. So his rich uncle, I think his name is Joseph Jones, took him under his wing, sent him to William and Mary. But then he was there a couple of years. That was when he was 16. When he was 18, he enlisted with George Washington, and he actually fought at the Battle of Trenton, the Christmas Day crossing the Delaware battle. And he was wounded in the battle. He was wounded in the chest with a musket ball from a Hessian. And he would have, it was a fatal wound, except the doctor who was with the troops came upon him minutes after it happened and staunched the bleeding, and so he recovered. And then he was also at Valley Forge. He was, I think that's where he became friends with Lafayette. He was good friends with Lafayette. So he wound up speaking French fluently, which helped him later. And then during the rest of the Revolutionary War, though, it didn't go well for him. He wanted to go into battle. He'd been named an officer, but there weren't enough enlisted men. So he kept trying to get his own battalion or whatever you should call it, and it never worked out. So it was kind of frustrating. He went back to William and Mary and finished his degree, and then he apprenticed under Thomas Jefferson to become a lawyer. So he's very, very close to Thomas Jefferson. He bought a property right next to Monticello to be close to Thomas Jefferson. In the Federalist, Anti-Federalist divide, he sided with Thomas Jefferson, and he was an Anti-Federalist, which cost him politically initially in his political career. He had a very varied, he did every political office you can think of in state government. He was on the House of Delegates in Virginia. He was the governor for 4 different terms. 3 were contiguous, and then another one later on. He was elected to the Continental Congress. He was a senator in the first Congress after the Constitution. He was ambassador to France twice, and then to England various times. He was just in the thick of everything. And it was very contentious, so he got burned a lot. There was a lot of vicious backstabbing and that sort of thing. So sometimes, after he'd given his all for like years, and he wasn't getting paid, or like he only got paid occasionally, because the government was such a mess and it didn't have the funds. So he was going into debt. He was giving everything, and then he would get backstabbed. So then he would take off a couple of years and just practice law and try to get his bearings again. He married, when he was 27, he married a 19-year-old girl named Elizabeth Courtwright from New York. Her family was really rich. And, but she, I guess they were wealthy, yeah. But she was very cultured and educated, and so she was really a help to him when he was ambassador in France. In fact, she rescued Lafayette's wife and kids from prison. Lafayette's wife, her mother and grandmother had been guillotined, and she was about to be guillotined, and Monroe's wife rented like the most garish coach, and she dressed up like really flamboyantly, because at the time they had arrived right in the midst of the Reign of Terror, and they were kind of the toast of the town, because Monroe was this big, he was tall and really physically, you know, dominating, I guess, and very athletic, very strong. And she was very beautiful. His wife was very beautiful. And so they were Americans. And at that time, during the French Revolution, the whole cause for republicanism was a big thing in France. And so they were the toast of the town. So she just was so courageous and brash. She just drove into the prison, asked to, I guess, visit Adrienne, Lafayette's wife, and then just swept her out of the prison. Nobody stopped them, and swept her into her coach and drove off. And then they smuggled her and her kids out of the country. And they also rescued Tom Paine from prison. He had been put in prison. He had left the United States and moved to France, and he was involved in the French Revolution. He was actually in the Assembly. He had voted against guillotining Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette, and Robespierre had Tom Paine, because of that, thrown into prison, and he was possibly going to be guillotined as well. And he was really sick in prison too. He was not doing well, and so Monroe negotiated his release. So it was really, they were really there in the thick of things. That was pretty exciting. And then they came home though, and there had been all this backstabbing going on because of the Federalist, anti-Federalist rivalry. And so George Washington, who he had, really revered, he felt betrayed by him. He felt betrayed by Madison. And he even felt betrayed by Jefferson at some point. He made up with both of them eventually. I'm not sure what happened with George Washington. Anyway, it was a long, complicated life, doing many, many political things. He was the one that signed the treaty for the Louisiana Purchase. He was always negotiating to try to get the British to stop impressing our sailors and disrupting our trade, especially when the Napoleonic Wars started. And we still wanted to trade with France. We're having all these trade wars because we were still a colonial economy, so we would gather up all the natural resources, send them over to England to be manufactured or processed, and then we would buy the goods, the finished goods. So Monroe was really into trying to be more self-sufficient and build infrastructure here. So he was into building factories and just everything we would need to be more self-sufficient. And of course, they never quite figured out how to end that impressment issue. And it kind of resulted in the War of 1812. He was under Madison, where everything was coming to a crisis because of the War of 1812. He was actually Secretary of State. He made Madison apologize to him before he would accept the position, but he was Secretary of State, and then he became Secretary of War. I forget what happened to the guy who was Secretary of War. He was just horrible. The guy who was Secretary of War, according to this guy, was just horrible. And so Monroe took over. Monroe was actually fighting in the War of 1812. And they had to flee, of course, when the British came in and burned the White House and everything. They all had to flee Washington, D.C. And I did not know this, but in the next county over, he had another estate. He wound up selling the estate that he had bought right next to Thomas Jefferson down by Monticello. He sold that, and he had this other estate up here called Oak Hill, which is less than an hour from my house. I didn't even realize it, but it's not public. It's been owned by the same family for like 3 generations or something. They bought it. So that'd be so neat to go see, though. I was not aware of it, that he had moved. I knew he was down near Charlottesville, and then he was in Fredericksburg, but now I didn't know he was so close. At the end of his life, that's where he lived, in Loudoun County. So anyway, and then, of course, 2 legacies of Monroe is, one, Liberia. The capital of Liberia is called Monrovia, and that's after him. And another complaint I have about this author, besides his obvious hero worship of Monroe, which made me distrust him a little bit, and that's why I want to read another book about the War of 1812 to see what other people say. I mean, was it really all Monroe running things? And that's the reason why we eventually won. Even though it was actually really a draw. But so that was one complaint I had. The other complaint I had was that the author barely talks about the issue of slavery or our treatment of the Native Americans. And he just says the bare minimum about slavery. It's very much, the author's very much in the mindset of Monroe and the early Americans, that, you know, the wilderness was theirs, they had a right to it, they had a right to settle it. And he even calls the Native Americans like the marauders, or, you know, the author seems to imply that it was okay to fight the Native Americans because they had allied with the British. Well, not all of them had, and anyway, there were other reasons why we were fighting them too. He just says the bare minimum because he wants to focus on hero worshiping him instead of the controversy. And I don't think we should, you know, I think it's wrong to apply modern mores to the past. But on the other hand, you can't sweep controversial issues under the rug either. That's dishonest too. So I felt like that was a real lack right there in the treatment of the issue of slavery and the Native Americans. Yeah, so that was, to me, it felt like almost like a throwback to a 1950s biography where it's not even considering the issues. But anyway, so Monroe helped to send freed slaves back to Africa, and he was involved in that. He just maybe 2 paragraphs about that, and that's a big thing. Another country was founded in Africa for these ex-slaves. So, and the capital is Monrovia after Madison. And the other thing, of course, is the Monroe Doctrine. So the Monroe Doctrine is this doctrine that Monroe presented in his second term as U.S. president. And I think it was his 7th year. And he basically got up and said, look, the colonial era is over. And any European power that wants to come over here and settle any part, North or South America, we are going to defend. We're going to see it as a hostile move on your part. At this time, a lot of the South American countries were trying to throw off the shackles of colonialism. And so it was very much in the spirit that we were going to, in this hemisphere, we were going to be our own people and we're not going to be colonies of Europe. And so that's where that came out of. And that's been used in various ways by presidents ever since. So so Monrovia and the Monroe Doctrine are, plus the whole Lewis and Clark thing, not Lewis and Clark, the Louisiana Purchase, that was due to him, and getting Florida, that was another thing that he got, because that was under Spanish control, so he was constantly fighting for that. So really, really interesting guy who was a real leader. He gets overlooked. Like I said, the author goes kind of overboard, and so I want to read other things about this time period that don't hero worship Monroe to see, you know, maybe Monroe didn't do everything right. So I don't think I can keep up with reading a president a month. I did Madison last month and Monroe this month, but I think what I'm going to do is read about the War of 1812. That's what I want to do. I'm really fascinated by that period of time in our history. So I really did enjoy reading the book a lot. So it is August 29th, and I have to really cram and finish these 2 books before the end. So I've got till Tuesday midnight, right, to read this. So I've been reading Coot Club by Arthur Ransom because I'm trying to read the Swallows and Amazon series. This one just isn't grabbing me. It's not that it isn't a good story. It's not that it doesn't have all the good elements of a good Swallows and Amazon's tale. I'm just not that interested in it. So, I mean, it's actually picked up. It's become a little bit more interesting, but I still have like over 100 pages to read. So I'm going to really have to cram. And I still need to finish up Paradise. I have gotten to Canto, next one I have to read is Canto 19. There are 33 cantos, so I've got to really cram on this too. I've only got 3 days, and 2 of the days are going to be really busy. For September, I don't have all the books that I'm going to be reading, but this is a lot of them. So I'm continuing my Bible in a year. We finished Isaiah, and we're in Ezekiel and Daniel. No, we finished Ezekiel. We're in Jeremiah and Daniel right now, and slowly reading through the Proverbs. I'm also going to start this little kind of self-retreat on prayer for the first 9 days of September. And then I am participating in Shaketember. So we're doing the Henriad. So I'm going to read Richard II, Henry IV, parts 1 and 2, and Henry V, which I've read before. We're going to go see next weekend, hopefully, God willing. We're going to go see Henry V. And then I don't have The Winter's Tale. I want to read that one too, because I think Lukash, what's the name of his channel? He changed it. A Cruel Reader's Thesis, I think he changed it to. He's doing that one for Shaketember. Steve Donahue is doing Henry IV, part 1, I believe, but I was already planning to read that. But I might try, if I can, to tack on The Winter's Tale that last week of September. And I'm also going to start reading Anthony Trollope's the Palliser series. And the first book is Can You Forgive Her? I love this edition. Dover Thrift, sometimes I don't like how they do it, but this is like the perfect floppiness. The print is the exact right size for my eyes. It's got little illustrations. I'm going to really just enjoy physically reading this book. It's a really nice edition. Now, where are those? It's got illustrations in it. They're really cute. I can't find any now. They're just a few of them. Oh, here we go. Here's one. Here we go. Anyway, so I'm going to try to read this. And then I also don't have with me, so there's The Winter's Tale. Then I'm also in this Humorous book club. And I'm going to read A Confederacy of Dunces, and I have to get that out of the library tomorrow. And I'm also reading on my Kindle for the Victorian book club I'm in, Lady Audley's Secret, which I've already started. I'm like 13% through, and it's great. I'm really enjoying it. I had no idea what to expect, but the writing is very easy and well written and quite intriguing. I think is it a sensation novel? I don't know what sensation novels are, but apparently they were popular. It's sort of a mystery because it's this Lady Audley's secret. You got to find out what her secret is. So anyway, so that is what I'm going to read in September. And that's what I need to read in the next couple of days. And that is the end of my review of the book on James Monroe. And I hope you are doing well, and happy reading. Bye.